It began like any typical episode of Steve Harvey's heartfelt talk show: laughter, warm stories, and inspiring guests. But no one, especially Steve himself, expected what would happen next. During a segment on global leadership and the role of integrity in modern times, Steve's team surprised him with a pre-recorded video message. The screen lit up, and to the audience's shock, it was none other than Ibrahim Traoré, the young and fearless transitional president of Burkina Faso. Known for his bold stance against neocolonialism and his connection with the people, Traoré wasn't just speaking to the crowd. He had a message specifically for Steve Harvey. At first, Steve sat back, smiling politely, but as Traoré began speaking in calm, measured English, the room fell silent. "Mr. Harvey," he said, "you do not know me personally, but I know of your work. You inspire millions across oceans. You speak to the spirit of the oppressed, the overlooked, and the forgotten. That is the work of true leadership." The compliment took Steve by surprise. He placed a hand over his mouth as Traoré continued, calling Steve a voice of dignity for African-descended people everywhere. It wasn't flattery. It was a brotherly recognition from one leader to another. Traoré went deeper. He spoke about growing up, hearing African-American voices like Steve's and how they shaped his worldview. "You taught us through laughter that we are allowed to hope," he said. "You taught us through struggle that pain is not our enemy, but our teacher." At this point, Steve was no longer smiling. His eyes welled up. The crowd noticed. The camera zoomed in slightly as he sat still, lips trembling, absorbing every word. The studio audience, normally lively, remained respectfully quiet, moved by the sincerity flowing from the screen. Then came the most powerful moment. Traoré said, "When I speak to young Burkinabe children, I tell them they are kings and queens, not because of their past, but because of their future. You, Mr. Harvey, remind us that the dream of freedom must be lived every day." Steve wiped away a tear. You could see in his eyes that this wasn't just about being flattered by a foreign president. This was about generations, bridging a cultural gap between African and African-American identities that have long been disconnected by history and geography. Traoré concluded his message with a direct invitation. "One day, if you would accept it, I would be honored to welcome you to Burkina Faso, not as a celebrity, not as a host, but as a brother returning home." The words "returning home" hit hard. Steve closed his eyes, leaned back in his chair, and let the tears fall freely. The crowd rose in applause, not the loud, showy kind, but the kind filled with reverence. The host, usually known for cracking jokes and offering sharp advice, sat in total vulnerability, touched in a way rarely seen on television. When the screen faded to black, Steve took a moment. "Man," he whispered, his voice cracked. "You have no idea what that means to me." He reached for a tissue, then looked up at the ceiling like he was trying to hold back the wave of emotions flooding him. "You do this job, and you think you're just telling stories or trying to make people laugh, but to know that a brother on the other side of the world sees it, that's everything." The audience remained on their feet, many of them also, wiping away tears, feeling the weight of that global connection. Steve then shared a story from his past. "I grew up with nothing. I had a dream, a voice, and a prayer. That's all I had. To know that dream reached Burkina Faso, that it meant something to a man like Ibrahim Traoré, that's more than I ever asked for." He spoke with a raw honesty that's hard to script. We don't always know who we're touching when we speak into a mic, but this right here proves that what we say matters. It was one of those rare TV moments that transcend entertainment, when it's no longer about ratings, but resonance. The clip of Traoré's message quickly went viral. People around the world shared it with captions like "True Unity" and "The Power of Words Across Continents." Journalists praised the moment as a bridge between diaspora voices and African leadership. Commentators on both sides of the Atlantic called it a blueprint for real cultural reconnection. For many viewers, it wasn't just about Steve or Traoré. It was about the possibility of healing, of finding kinship in places we thought were separated by history, but are now joined by spirit and purpose. Steve later took to social media to express his gratitude. "I'm honored beyond words," he wrote. "President Ibrahim Traoré, you didn't just speak to me. You spoke to every black man who's ever wondered if his voice mattered." The comments under his post were filled with love and pride, from Americans, Africans, and people from all over the globe. It became more than a viral clip. It became a symbol, a moment where a talk show host and a revolutionary leader connected, not as celebrity and politician, but as men rooted in the same legacy of struggle, love, and perseverance. Long after the applause faded and the cameras turned off, the moment stayed alive in people's hearts. In a world so divided by politics, race, and geography, this single act of recognition proved that shared values can still move us. It reminded viewers that leadership isn't always about laws or speeches. Sometimes it's about knowing when to lift someone up with your words. Ibrahim Traoré, a president under pressure, and Steve Harvey, a man who's made millions laugh and think, showed the world what happens when two powerful voices meet, not in confrontation, but in compassion.